Hey folks, my name is Aaron and welcome back to Major History. Today we're going to have a mega episode discussing ancient Mesopotamia and its early stages. So, uh, last time we had a U.S. history video regarding the New World, and that was fun because I rushed it and it wasn't a great video, but it's one of my most popular right now, so I mean, relatively. So that's fun. That's interesting. I had actually already recorded this video in its entirety, and entire. I've actually already recorded this video in its entirety, um, which ended up being around 40 minutes long, and um, I uploaded it, and the next day I went to edit it, and there was no audio, which was so much fun. So here I am recording this again, but it should just be more polished now, so I should know what to say, right? Well, we'll see. Starting with what is Mesopotamia? It's a fertile region uh, in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea and the Persian Gulf, and it's distinctively between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. And it's located in the Fertile Crescent, which is this area that kind of looks like a crescent in the middle of those two areas, including the Nile. So Mesopotamia is sort of a harsh landscape because it only gets 10 inches of rainfall every year. It has sandy soils, and the summer temperatures regularly exceed 110 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know what that is in Celsius, please forgive me. The rivers are prone to unpredictable flooding, and the Tigris changes course from year to year. So that's incredibly difficult for them, and it's going to actually shape their entire worldview to come. So let's start talking about the early Ubaid cities, which start appearing around 5900 BCE. And they're founded by the Ubaid people, so named for the city Al-Ubaid, Iraq. And the Persian Gulf at this time extended at least 100 miles further inland than today, as you can see here. And some settlements, because of this, settled in fertile marshlands, but mostly Mesopotamia contains of mud flats, and um, this would be the main reason for the development of irrigation systems like dikes, levees, and they would do this to control flooding and direct excess water into canals. And it's at this time that the Ubaid peoples would start creating central structures that served religious, economic, and administrative functions. For example, each settlement had a temple at its center made of dried mud brick. As we talked about, the mud flats, there's an abundance of mud, so they would create bricks from this, lay them out in the sun, and they would be able to be used in architecture. And these temples would actually act as storehouses as well, and it's presumed to have started from shrines that eventually grew into larger architectural projects, which leads us to the growth of Uruk. So some Ubaid cities became larger and more organized, and Uruk is considered the first city-state of Sumer. And this city owed its rapid growth to its importance as a religious center. And pictured here is the White Temple as it is today, and the digital reconstruction of it. And its four corners are actually positioned on the and its four corners are positioned to face the cardinal points of a compass, which is pretty interesting and cool. It's brick, mud brick, painted white, and 40 feet tall. In case you wanted to know. And by 3100 BCE, Uruk covered 6 square kilometers and had a population of around 40,000 people. Oh, and it was mostly uh, built by slave labor. And this brings us to the evolution of writing in Mesopotamia. By around 4000 BCE, Sumerians were using clay tablets to keep their inventory. And within a few centuries, did I say tablets? I meant tokens. They were using clay tokens to keep inventory. And within a few centuries, they created clay balls that were hollow and filled with these clay tokens, with the shapes of the clay tokens inscribed on the outside. And by around 3300 BCE, like 700 years later, the clay balls were replaced by clay tablets inscribed with the symbols that represented the tokens. And from this, writing evolved. Pictograms, which are symbols that represent real objects, became integral at this time. In the first real form of writing to exist, it sort of evolved around the same time as the Egyptian hieroglyphics, which we'll get into in the next video. Later, on these pictograms in Mesopotamia, special marks were added to indicate whether you were supposed to read it as the literal object that the symbol represented, an abstract idea, or the sound that you make when you read it. And after a while, styluses made from reeds made it easier to imprint symbols, and this was called cuneiform, the script that came from it. And eventually, every phonetic sound in the Mesopotamian language was represented by a symbol. And writing became a skill for a small but educated minority. Yeah, the rich, who could afford to just sit around and read and write. Sumerian society, at this point, everybody shared a common culture and language, the Sumerian language. They competed for natural resources and sources of labor, which led to warfare among the city-states. And temples began to control the production of textiles, employing thousands of enslaved people, which were mostly women and children. And elites of these temples, like priests and whatever, played a key role in long-distance trade. So that's interesting. Each city-state actually had its own gods, which may come as a shock to you, and its own aristocracy. As much as half of the population of Sumer were subsistence farmers, which means that they farmed to sustain themselves and no more no less. The rest of these people were dependent on the temple as artisans and agricultural laborers to create surplus for the city. And many people in Sumerian society were prisoners of war from other city-states, and their bondage was limited to 3 years. But foreigners were held indefinitely and treated as property. They were beaten, branded, bought, and sold, and they could be enslaved for a multitude of different causes. It didn't have one particular cause in general. Which brings us to the leadership at the time, Sumerian kingship. As competition for resources intensified, warfare among cities was far more frequent. Military leadership began to emerge in the early dynastic period, and this period is characterized by the emergence of families who held on to power and wealth. That's what a dynasty is. And at the heads of these dynasties were these war heroes or warlords called Lugals, which in the Mesopotamian language is translated to big men or great men or powerful men. And the Lugals believed that their success in battle earned them the right to exploit the city's wealth. And one such Lugal is Gilgamesh, and stories about this man are at first legends, but then become much more in the Epic of Gilgamesh, which was many stories passed down, uh, and it's the first literary monument in world history. It was a series of stories previously recited orally and later collected on clay tablets. It follows Gilgamesh, a Lugal of Uruk, who um, got his claim to fame by conquering neighboring city-states. And there were... Okay, so in the story, I'm just going to do this. Citizens loved Gilgamesh, but they had certain complaints about his rule becoming too comfortable, including keeping their sons at war, disrespecting the priesthood, and laying with the nobility's wives and daughters. And they prayed to the gods, hoping that they would answer their prayers to have their leader be a more respectable person. And Enlil is the god who responds. This is the god of creation, I believe, and he he creates basically a twin of Gilgamesh, who is Enkidu, and he's a wild man who lives with the animals, meaning that supposedly he was from a nomadic tribe of some sort, and uh, Enkidu challenges Gilgamesh to uh, a battle, and he and Gilgamesh wrestle for a while, and Gilgamesh eventually realizes that he cannot um, defeat him, and they become fast friends. Enkidu, after a while, is civilized by a sexual encounter with a temple prostitute, um, and he Enkidu and Gilgamesh go on several adventures together, including the slaying of Humbaba, which is a evil manifestation, and they also kill a bull, which was apparently sent down by the goddess Inanna, and Inanna did not like that, this fertility goddess, and she decided that because of Enkidu and Gilgamesh's mockery, she would go to Enlil and say, hey, they're making fun of me. They're mocking my power. And Enlil responds by killing Enkidu. And Gilgamesh is distraught. He is asking, oh, why, Enlil, have you slain Enkidu? And he starts to have a sense of his own mortality, and he's frightened of it, even though he is apparently two-thirds God. He is frightened by the idea of his own mortality, and he decides to seek out a man named Utnapishtim, who is an immortal man and the sort of the bridge between the spirit world and the regular world. And he approaches him, and he talks to him, and Utnapishtim describes his journey, and he describes how the world was once covered in total flood, but Utnapishtim was saved by a god that instructed him to create a vessel to travel across the water, bringing two of each animal and one of each skilled craftsman from his village. And he tells Utnapishtim that in order for him to revive Enkidu, which was Gilgamesh's whole thing, he would have to withstand a certain challenge. And this challenge was for Gilgamesh to stay awake for 6 days and 7 nights. Rather comedically, Gilgamesh falls asleep, and he stays asleep for 7 nights. And when he wakes up, Utnapishtim says, well, you failed that challenge, so now I'm gonna let you leave because you didn't take my challenge seriously. And at first he tries to deny it, but Utnapishtim had his wife get evidence of time passing by baking a loaf of bread and allowing it to mold over time. And Gilgamesh, seeing this, decides, okay, I'm going to leave. And he and his ferryman are about to leave when Utnapishtim's wife says, hey, he came so far. Why don't you give him something? And this thing that Utnapishtim decides to lead Gilgamesh on a quest for is this fruit of immortality. And he tells Gilgamesh where this is, and Gilgamesh dives into a well to retrieve this, or into some body of water to retrieve this fruit. And at the bottom, he is so close, he almost gets it, but a snake comes by, takes the fruit, and eats it and sheds its skin, which is the origin of why snakes shed their skin, because they are immortal. And Gilgamesh is distraught once again. He said, oh my god, I did a good deed for a reptile. Actual quote. And he's distraught, and he tells the ferryman, just take me back home. And at this point, the ferryman takes him home, and Gilgamesh, so happy to be home, just says, hey, you know what? I might not be able to be immortal, or I might not be able to exist as a god, and Enkidu might be gone, but, look what I have done for this wonderful city. And he gives the ferryman a tour of his city. And at the end is basically an obituary for Gilgamesh. Not really talking about his travels or anything about his reign, but talking about his service to Enlil and his undying devotion towards him. So, pretty interesting, right? That was off the dome, by the way. Okay, you guys should kind of praise me for that one. It was a mess in my last recording. I kept forgetting details and whatever. But that brings us to Sumerian hierarchies, and I don't know why this slide is titled like this. I made the graphic to represent the hierarchy here. Just makes sense, but these are for the common people. But this slide just talks about the different rulers of Sumeria. Rulers used divinity and closeness to gods to legitimize their power, and regular people, viewed the gods. Sorry, this is actually incorrect. Watch this, guys. Watch. So the commoners would view gods as Lugals who lorded over them, and humans only exist to work for their gods. Gods and Lugals depend on their subjects to honor and sustain them, and Lugals are obligated to the gods to create offerings, festivals, and massive building projects. A king who would only indulge himself in luxuries was likely to cause bad luck to Sumer in the way of economic destruction and ecological problems. Which brings us to Sumerian science and technology. By 6000 BCE, certain cultures throughout Eurasia were already using copper, but Mesopotamia had no copper. But the Mesopotamians obtained it through trade during the Uruk period. And they made weapons and tools from it. And later they did the same thing with bronze in the Bronze Age. They invented the wheel, folks, and it was modeled after the potter's wheel. And they used this wheel for multiple different things, including carts drawn by donkeys, which massively improved productivity. They would also put wheels on chariots, and this gave warriors a distinct advantage, and trampling over enemies and such, even without this awesome picture. And this is supposed to be over there. But they also invented the seed drill. They also invented timekeeping and trade. No, they didn't invent trade. Okay, I don't know about that. So this slide is just titled "Timekeeping, Trade, and Travel," just for literacy purposes. So they practiced map making, mathematics. And, they counted 1 to 10, but they also counted 0 to 60. So imagine, all numbers between 1 and 9. They have a distinct digit. Well, imagine a unique digit from 1 to 59. So 60 would be written as 10. It's like in binary. You would write 0 as 0, 1 as 1, and then 1 0 is 2, and 1 1 is 3. It works in that way. And then there's also something called hexadecimal, but we don't have to get into that. It uses letters as numbers in certain places, which is what you use for color codes in online. Anyway, we're way off topic. Domes and arches were created by these people as well as the lunar calendar. And this lunar calendar had 12 months, consisting of 6 months that had 30 days and 6 months that lasted 29 days. And they added another month every few years. They also had a 60-minute hour and a 60-second minute. So that's where that comes from. They also practiced astronomy and astrology, so they would look to the stars, and they would practice divination and stuff, fortune telling and stuff like that. And now is the fun part when we get to the first empires. So the first person we're going to be talking about and his realm is Sargon and the Akkadian realm. And the Akkadians are from central Mesopotamia, influenced by Sumer heavily. They were north of Sumer. And the Akkadian language was Semitic, and Sumerians would come to fear Sargon for his ambitions, which were to unify the independent city-states through espionage, which he planted spies and priests in Sumer to bring them to their cause. And while his attempts to unite independent city-states may have been more aspirational than actual, he definitely did have an effect on religion and culture in the region, such as unifying the Akkad goddess Ishtar with Inanna, and he lessened rivalry between these two regions by installing high priests in every city. And his daughter Enheduanna was the high priestess of Uruk and Ur, and she is the earliest known author. Pretty cool. Obviously, the Epic of Gilgamesh is an older literary work, and there are older literary works than Enheduanna's hymns, but they are not written specifically by a person, if that makes sense. We don't know who the people were that wrote those. We don't have a name of the author. But Enheduanna is the earliest known author, if that makes sense. By 2200 BCE, most people in the Mesopotamia were able to communicate in either the Sumerian or Akkadian languages, and eventually Sumer and Akkad would become virtually indistinguishable. Which brings us to the dynasty of Ur. After Sargon's son, Naram-Sin, died, Akkadian rule did as well. Ur-Nammu is the first of this dynasty. He's responsible for creating great ziggurats and other architectural marvels. This specific one is still standing today, and I urge you to go to Google Maps and look at it because the bricks look identical to bricks that we use today. It's really cool. And then his son, Shulgi, created armies and military conquest, did better than his father did, raiding all the way up to the Zagros Mountains, and demanded massive tribute, like 350,000 sheep per year massive tribute. And he decided to create a state-run textile production to process the wool. Many slaves and laborers. He created a lot of jobs with this tribute, which, code of law. So Shulgi created a code of law before Hammurabi, before it was cool. He created fair weights and measures, protection for widows and orphans, limitations on the death penalty, better than Hammurabi, and there was no mechanism to enforce this code. So he created these laws, but couldn't really enforce them. He hadn't figured that part out yet. But Hammurabi did. The Amorites, formerly known as the Amorites, who were formerly nomads and warriors, were a Semitic group of newcomers to Mesopotamia, and Hammurabi was their chief, and he became the leader of Babylon around 1792 BCE. Babylon was a insignificant city at the time between the Tigris and Euphrates, but this would quickly change and become one of the most known cities in all of the world, I guess. Hammurabi recognized that brute force was not the only option or the only weapon that he could use to conquer and unify all of Mesopotamia. He started using his intelligence, diplomacy, and strategic planning, and writing as weapons. Through letters and embassies, Hammurabi induced other city-states rulers to fight against each other, and while he quietly built his army and portrayed himself as an ally to both sides. While these armies fought each other, Hammurabi sat by and watched and waited for the correct opportunity to strike, taking out both of them at once. And this was what sparked the Old Babylonian Empire. Sumer and Akkad became Babylonia. And to unify, Hammurabi promoted the worship of the patron god of Babylon, Marduk. And Marduk was used, while Hammurabi did believe in and worship Marduk, he used Marduk to legitimize his rule. And Hammurabi would become the first ruler to launch wars based in religious supremacy. And this may have been the precedent that started colonial expansion. Hammurabi presented himself as the, quote, shepherd of the people and a capable king, not just a mere Lugal. Hammurabi's code that he developed, his code of laws, was inscribed on stone pillars and placed in public centers, along with little pictures. With these laws were laws that regulated business deals and the use of public resources, especially water. Laws relating to taverns and brothels, which were run by women at the time. Laws about debt and slavery. Laws about inheritance, marriage, divorce, and widows' rights. And laws that punished murder, assault, and even medical malpractice. Most of these laws were aimed at free commoners, and there are some laws that treated certain people differently depending on their class. For example, I have the Code of Hammurabi right here. Code 209 of Hammurabi's code states, If an Awilu, a high-ranking man, strikes a woman of the Awilu class, and thereby causes her to miscarry her fetus, he shall weigh and deliver 10 shekels of silver for her fetus. 210 says, if that woman should die, they shall kill the Awilu's father. Sorry, his daughter. My bad. And 211 says, if he should cause a woman of the commoner class to miscarry her fetus by the beating, he shall weigh and deliver 5 shekels of silver. If the woman should die, he shall weigh and deliver 30 shekels of silver. And that one's 212. Who he delivers that at the end there to, I'm not entirely sure, but whatever. So whether your fetus is going to be 10 or 5 shekels, depending on your class. So class was important, and this is not even just in this specific one. Like here in 218 it says, if a physician performs a major surgery with a bronze lancet upon an Awilu class person and thus causes the Awilu's death, or opens an Awilu's temple with a bronze lancet and thus blinds the Awilu's eye, they shall cut off his hand. If a physician performs a surgery with a bronze lancet upon a slave of a commoner, and thus causes the slave's death, he shall replace the slave with a slave of comparable value. If he opens the commoner slave temple with a bronze lancet, and thus blinds his eye, he shall weigh and deliver silver equal to half his value. So that's interesting. So that should show you the implications of class. And there are major laws regarding women as well, and they're, so here is 162. If a man marries a wife, she bears him children, and that woman then goes to her fate, her father shall have no claim to her dowry. Her dowry belongs only to her children. If a man marries a wife, but she does not provide him with children, and that woman goes to her fate, if his father-in-law then returns to him the bride wealth that man brought to his father-in-law's house, her husband shall have no claim to that woman's dowry. Her dowry belongs only to her father's house. Others which say, if a man's wife has her husband killed on account of her relationship with another male, they shall impale that woman. If a man should carnally know his daughter, they shall banish that man from the city. If a man selects a bride for his son, and his son carnally knows her, after which he himself then lies with her, and they seize him in the act, they shall bind that man and cast him into the water. If a man selects a bride for his son, and his son does not yet carnally know her, and he himself then lies with her, he shall weigh and deliver to her 30 shekels of silver. Moreover, he shall restore to her whatever she brought from her father's house, and a husband of her choice shall marry her. Others, including 138, which is, if a man intends to divorce his first-ranking wife who did not bear him children, he shall give her silver as much as her bride wealth, and restore to her the dowry that she brought from her father's house, and he shall divorce her. If there is no bride wealth, he shall give her 60 shekels of silver as a divorce settlement. If he is a commoner, he shall give her 20 shekels of silver. And there's a really lengthy one there. But it basically ends with, if a woman talks ill of her husband, she dies. So women both have a really good progressive stance in reality in this time, as well as a really bad, really disgusting time living. And yeah, I don't know what that last bullet is supposed to mean. But that is essentially it for my coverage of Mesopotamia. So let me know what you guys thought. I'm gonna end it on this slide of Sargon because I really like his mask. Let me know if you guys liked this video. If you want to see more in the comments below, tell me what civilization you would be interested in hearing about next. But either way, next time is going to be ancient Egypt, and then after that might be some Indo-European societies. Recently, I've been reading about the Mycenaeans, the Mycenaean Greeks, and the Minoan Cretes, and that is fascinating to me. We're going to be talking about the Hebrews at some point, so I'm excited for that. So yeah, a lot of interesting stuff on the horizon as my exams slowly approach. If you like this video, please consider leaving a like. It helps the channel quite a bit. If you want to be notified to see more, you're going to have to hit that subscribe button and the bell notification button with all notifications turned on, because I know you don't want YouTube telling you which notifications you receive. So just turn all of them on. You can ignore it if you want to. I would hate you if you ignored it, but you know what? We live on. Anyway, I appreciate you watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.